We are now live on YouTube. The link I will share.
Thank you, Amir.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the pre-forum session of day one of ITU Regional Development Forum for Asia Pacific region. It is my pleasure to welcome you all today, and I hope we are going to have some very interesting start from the region where actually the day starts in our region, which is the Pacific. And today we have with us our moderator, Ms. Topotua Baravilala, who is the acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Communications, Fiji. But before we hand over the floor to her for her able moderatorship, let me just give a few announcements which are more linked with the logistics. So during the session, please mute yourself so that we don't have external noise coming in and we can all listen to the audio very carefully. And also, we'd also like to request that if you have any questions or suggestions, do post it in the chat, and we will ensure that those comments and suggestions are brought to the forum. If you have any pressing questions, and if you do want to take the floor, please indicate so. But in the interest of time, we would prefer to use the chat session. Without further ado, let me now hand over the floor to Ms. Baravilala, who is not only the acting permanent secretary, but has considerable experience in digital transformation and has also been looking after Digital Fiji program. So Ms. Baravilala, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ashish. Bulavinaka from Fiji, and it's indeed a pleasure to welcome you all to the first pre-forum session on accelerating digital transformation in the Pacific. Now, I know we're all here to speak virtually on the great many benefits of digital transformation. However, I am very much looking forward to the day we all have the chance to meet in person once again. Now, this particular session looks at the digital transformation experiences across the Pacific and the Smart Islands concept. And we will hear more about this from our panelists that are made up of Mr. Loya, who will be speaking on Samoa's digital transformation experience, Mr. Riaz and Mr. So from the ITU, and Mr. Varghese from Facebook. Now, prior to that, I would also give a brief update on Fiji's digital transformation journey, and indeed during this unique COVID-19 period, which has brought ICTs to the forefront. Now, as part of a strategic decade-long effort to modernize our economy and develop our telecommunications, we have made historic strides in bridging the digital divide in our society. In a way, we were unsuspectingly adapting to this crisis long before anyone had ever heard of COVID-19. Now, today, 95% of Fijians can access mobile internet connectivity across 3G, 4G, and 4G plus networks. Our access to the Southern Cross cable fiber optic network, which we have connected our two largest islands to, provides fast, direct, resilient, and secure connectivity. Now, this network will be further improved with the completion of the Southern Cross Next cable network, offering even faster connectivity by the end of next year. In line with our rural broadband connectivity efforts, our 26 telecenters are bringing digital technology into Fijian classrooms and the nearby communities in underconnected regions. As connection speeds have increased, our deregulated telecommunications sector has seen data prices plummet. Now, we've done a recent review on it, and it costs approximately $1 Fijian or US 47 cents for 10 gigabytes of data. Decreases in the import duty on mobile phones have made smartphones affordable for the vast majority of Fijians. Our digital transformation journey has seen more government services also moved online, including our births, deaths, and marriages registry services, our register of companies processes, and our intra-government data exchanges. Now, these have led to Fiji's increased rating in the recent UNE government survey from 102 in 2018 to 90 this year, which has been a jump of 12 places, and one which we intend to further improve on as we plan to bring the efficiency of digital technology to business dealings by digitizing the process of starting a business and obtaining a construction permit. And on the foundation of high quality networks of telecommunications, we have paved the way for new innovative businesses, and one that we've seen recently during COVID-19, such as online food delivery and remote learning, as entrepreneurs find opportunity amidst this pandemic and other businesses adapt to this new normal. The government has also used digital technology to navigate this COVID-19 crisis. Now, we have a contact tracing mobile application that we have developed, which is known as the Care Fiji application, and it's based on the Trace Together application that has been pioneered by Singapore. To date, that application has been downloaded over 82,000 times. And as we look to become more trade and travel ready, this mobile contact tracing technology is pivotal and will be pivotal to maintaining Fiji's exemplary record of COVID containment and building confidence among our development partners. One thing that we have seen is that this pandemic has proved to us how adaptable and resilient digital technology can make a society. And we will press on with our digital transformation as a matter of absolute necessity for our achievement of the SDGs, long-term economic security, and prosperity. Now, my hope is that this session is going to be a great opportunity for us to learn from one another, see what has worked, see what hasn't worked, and together build a more inclusive, more resilient, and digital Pacific and indeed world. With those brief remarks, I'd now like to invite Mr. Suetena Loe, the Assistant Chief Executive Officer from the Samoan Ministry of Communications, to give a few insights on Samoa's digital transformation experience. Mr. Loe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. May I request for the presentation? Good evening and good afternoon and good morning to all our fellow regional friends and colleagues. I'll be presenting on Samoa's digital journey and what the government as well as the nation have developed in terms of its position in the region. So today, Samoa has become one of the leading countries in developing digital drive in terms of its endeavor to transform Samoa into a digitally enabled country in terms of services and regional partnership. In its digital journey, Samoa has, through the communication sector plan developed by the government, have enabled a lot of the instrumentation of a lot of the developments within the country, such as the launch of the cybersecurity strategy for the nation, as well as the development in terms of approving the national cybersecurity emergency response team, which the government has approved during the 2019. Upon that, Samoa seeks to develop its digital transformation agenda in terms of transforming both private and public industries into a more coherent and harmonizing era, hence why the Digital Transformation Authority has been approved for setup. During the same time, Samoa has digitally moved forward in terms of its agenda of moving away from the old ways of connecting the country to new ways, such as the reason why we have totally transferred all our digital televisions into the nation's capacity. In terms of that, Samoa no longer has analog TV, but fully now supports digital television. During these times, the National ICT Steering Committee was said to be transformed into redirecting its capacity in terms of not only catering for national ICT development, but aligning the national ICT development in terms of a bigger scope to transforming the country across many levels, hence why it has redefined its name to be the National Digital Transformation Council. During the 2020 initiatives, Samoa had sought to digitize a lot of its infrastructural requirements, one of which is the street naming and addressing, which from a PR to the 4K radius of the city, it has been digitally transformed. Apart from that, there are many other government initiatives that are parallelly happening across multiple sectors within the Samoan government, which is guided by the government of Samoa's digital transformation program, which seeks to improve services to the people and more. May I request the next slide, please? In the private sector, Samoa has done a lot of great work from its fellow partnerships with private companies as well as private stakeholders in terms of transforming Samoans' private areas in terms of providing digital services from our telcos as well as other partners and NGOs. One of these NGOs was reestablished in 2019, which is the Samoa Information Technology Association, which seeks to provide assistance in terms of building digital capacity and digital solutions with the help of the local companies and local digital providers. Within Samoa's own capacity, it has gained 6 ISPs. For such a small country, this is a huge development in terms of providing competition in terms of lowering cost of devices, lowering cost of internet, and developing access infrastructure for all the nation and services. Apart from this, Samoa is now totally digitally enabled in terms of television station, and there are a few that are currently now in establishment, and more is yet to come. In areas as radio and microwave, we see more and more radio stations transforming its analog transmissions into digital transmission, as well as adopting online streaming services that enabled cross-country and cross-regional sharing of content from partners around the region. We also see that the increase in digital vendors in terms of products and services that these vendors are providing. And the cost of these products have slowly decreased and has built a more accessible environment for people to access information as well as digital content. Many of our media companies now also have access to online portals and online material websites that could assist the digital accessibility of many in the country. In terms of financial and in terms of financial products, a lot of the new products that have been pushed out by our local telcos as well as ISPs are now moving into digital payments like MTALA, Digicel Mobile, and more. Next slide, please. In terms of infrastructure, Samoa has worked quite hard in terms of establishing some of the most vital infrastructures within the country to cater for this need. Within that, Samoa has established an internet wholesale company, the Samoa Submarine Cable Company, which sources these wholesale internet to all these providers that we have locally. Samoa has now 3 submarine cables, the SASH cable, the Tuisamo cable, and the Manatua cable, which has continually increased the accessibility and reliance and resilience of the internet within the country. Apart from this, Samoa has access to satellites which have linked schools as well as satellites which have allowed telcos to have backup and DRP requirements. Upon this, some of these satellite links were great partnership through ITU and its various stakeholders in terms of getting this through the country. We have also seen infrastructure support in terms of Wi-Fi access at many ports within the country, as well as public transport, from the airports to all the public transports. 4G and 3G coverage have reached across Samoa 100%. In terms of accessibility, many are now enjoying the high-speed internet that is brought through by submarine cables that we have, and reliance on reliable connectivity through our 4G, which have been provided by our telcos and ISPs. As noted earlier, Samoa is now 100% digitally covered in terms of digital coverage on television and more. We have seen also local radios as well as partnering radios go online, broadcasting digitally and streaming online through various apps. Digital streaming has become part of the radio infrastructure in terms of sharing content from various partners across the region. Adoption of new technologies such as using drone for data collection have already been seen in the agriculture and fishing market. Next slide, please. During the COVID-19, Samoa has seen a lot of useful uses of internet as well as digital platforms. And through this, in protecting the health and safety of the country, the government, through its various partners and private sector stakeholders, have developed online educational portals that have been silver rated, meaning that they are free of charge from all telcos in terms of building and allowing for e-learning portals to be accessible. Through COVID as well, we have seen the free Safe SIM for students, which have allowed students to access online content from their homes, from the safety of their own families. During COVID as well, we have seen the come together of these telcos as well as ISP in co-location on improving the reliability of connectivity through microwave and fiber lines across the country. Upgrades through the radio towers have also seen great works in terms of sustaining radio connectivity while people move around. Government bodies during this time as well have also worked together in coming up with digital emergency plans that will assist with work from home in the case that Samoa will be hit by COVID. Currently, Samoa is free from this, but the government is still preparing for the worst case, and hence why these plans have been put in place. Apart from that, while the government works from its side, the private sector have also worked in reducing the data plans to access these infrastructure and resources that have been put online and have been pushed out to the public. In terms of connectivity, we see an increase in domestic and international partnership in various stakeholders. Next slide, please. At this time, Samoa's journey is increasing and is slowly gathering momentum, and we hope that the continuation of this momentum will continue into the future in producing more relevant and more support for the future to come. Next slide, please. While Samoa had prepared for many of its digital transformation agenda, it has also worked and it is currently working on establishing the following in terms of setting up the Samoa National Digital IT, the Samoa Digital Government Platform, the establishment of the Digital Transformation Authority, the establishment of the National CERT, the establishment of the National Digital Library, which will open access to more knowledge and more sharing of information, the development of an open access policy for all of the country to access information, and development in terms of continuous learning and online education after academic works. Apart from that, Samoa seeks to be one of the most connected countries in the Pacific, working on its domestic IXP, as well as working with other regional partners in terms of the Pacific IXP and more. Samoa's innovation has become one of the core factors in terms of driving for digital transformation, hence why the government is seeking to develop an innovation park that will develop new talents and new resources, as well as new products that could greater benefit the region as a whole. In all of that, a lot of those schemes and programs are still in the works in terms of stimulating IT startup companies and various partners in terms of providing solutions for the region and Samoa. Next slide, please. And thank you. And on that note, I would like to request in terms of the support from our partners and regional friends that I think that there are many areas that we all need to work on. And one of these areas is developing services that is driven by digital applications and services to develop smart cities and smart villages and enable smart communities, which will better sustain our existence in the Pacific in terms of the resources that we have now. Such as this, we would like to propose that we would like to seek assistance from ITU and its partners in terms of developing partnership throughout the region in terms of building a digital knowledge society for all of the Pacific so that we could access and develop new talents that will produce smarter technology and smarter way of life for our digital villages. And on that note, I thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Luia. And I mean, that's a perfect segue into the two next panelists. But just some pointers that I've just noted from your contribution, and thank you for that, is with regards to digital literacy and the importance of that multi-stakeholder approach, and definitely in terms of sharing of infrastructure, which is something that in the Pacific, that's something that we all, that we always need to be mindful of. So with regards, so moving on, I'd now like to invite Mr. Amir Riaz and Mr. Xiaoming So to present on the ITU Satellite Connectivity Emergency Telecom Project Impact Assessment Report and moving towards smart cities. Vinaka.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Welcome everyone. Greetings in the time zones that you are, different time zones that we are. So in this presentation, I will take up 3 parts. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The first is the report on the Pacific submarine connectivity, in which we will discuss some of the details on the connectivity that we have, submarine connectivity, and the improvement in the domestic connectivity using the fiber. The second part, which me and CEO would jointly report, is the satellite connectivity project that we had done with the 9 countries in the Pacific, and we have some done a report of the impact that this project has created. We will go a little more into the details of this, and finally, I will finish with a discussion on some information on the smart sustainable village model that we have done on in ITU, and then the other projects can build on it. Next slide, please. So first, the international connectivity in Pacific. This chart represents the international connectivity and the links that are coming in different Pacific countries. You see that currently active submarine links are many in different countries in the Pacific region, and there are also many additional that are being planned and being worked up. So what we see is that in going towards a digital Pacific, a lot of requirements are being fulfilled using the submarine cable connectivity, but there are still some works that have to be done in some smaller countries where there are already potentially links that are being planned, but as yet there have no connectivity, international connectivity using the submarine cable, which is obviously a very expensive and requires a lot of investment. Next slide, please. What we have also seen over the years recently, that there has been also a lot of shift and a lot of investments going on domestically. In the chart you can see the domestic links that have been worked up in the country, led by of course the PNG, which has a very large mass in the Pacific. Around 5 over 5,000 kilometers of new cable has been laid domestically, which would be completed by 2021. But other countries also, for example, in case of FSM, there has been a lot of investment that is going on to put in the required ICT infrastructure in the form of fixed links, the terrestrial and transmission links. So what we in future, what we see there is the Pacific is pretty much linked not only to country, but domestically also the fiber is connecting a lot of places, and we see a lot of connected villages and towns within Pacific in the future. Next slide, please. Now, while many of the areas that are being connected, we had started a project in the Pacific using to connect the rural population. Next slide, please. The main idea when this project was conceptualized was, of course, the fiber connectivity and the structure was low, and in the rural area, the cost of the telecommunication service was very high. The main beneficiaries of the projects were the remote islands and the communities that were living there, and the impact also was targeted to the ordinary people like farmers, fishermen, and also the students. Plus, what eventually we have seen, we will discuss later, CEO will discuss later, there has been a lot of benefits which have gone beyond what we had conceptualized. So when we have given the connectivity to the rural area, the amount and the kind of applications that are running on this connectivity have far gone out from what we have scoped earlier when the project was conceptualized. Next slide, please. So just to give you a background, it started way back in 2014, and the commitment was from a very high level. You can see all the countries, either the prime minister or the president, they had done this individual country agreements with ITU. So the commitment was there from the political side at the high leadership level, and this is what has enabled us to go through with the project and have a real impact, especially in the areas which were targeted by the countries themselves. So the places which were given for to us to complete and have the kind of like the connectivity were chosen by the countries themselves. Next slide, please. As a background, in the video that is running, you can see the thumbnails of where actually these KU band equipment were put in place. But in total, 93 VSATs were given, and 3 different technologies were used. Earlier, the C band equipment was given to the 9 countries, and then KU band equipment was brought in 2018. This helped 5 countries, the KU band, because the coverage was limited, not to all the Pacific, but limited to some countries. And then very recently, after the launch of the Pacific 1 satellite, we have given terminals of the KA band to the 5 countries which come under the coverage of the Pacific. And these all 4 were the partners. They provided the satellite capacity to us. The Pacific, Inmarsat, Intelsat, and INSO, they were the project partners on the capacity wise. ITSO, they also provided some funding to train the local ministry people and develop the skills to install the equipment at the rural site. And this is one of the success in this project, that ITU didn't go to these rural places, but we trained the people so that it has a sustainability element in troubleshooting and installing the equipment themselves at an indigenous level. In some places, there was no electricity. We provided some hydro power solutions, and when they were installed, these VSETs were installed in the form of schools. We provided additional equipment to build a complete school lab for computers. Next slide, please. So, Sio, I will shift to you because we did an impact assessment report. We contacted all the countries, and we had some very interesting things to share with you. Sio, to you.
Thank you, Amir, and hi, everybody. So with as Amir just explained, with the conclusion of the Pacific Satellite Connectivity Project, ITU really wanted to understand the outcomes of the project and what are the benefits that the project has delivered. So from July to September this year, we conducted the study, mainly through interviews with all the different focal points and get the feedback on what happened on the ground. So part of the project is also to develop recommendations around what can be done going forward to build a sustainable model so that the connectivity can benefit more people to more places across the region. And then finally, we talk about cooperation. And early on the presentation by Samoa, highlighted a few things. I'll elaborate a few more points later in the slides. But just on the screen itself, there are quite a few stats there. I'll just call out a few. As Amir mentioned, 9 countries participated in the projects, 93 units were provided. But unfortunately, there were some challenges, and all in all, 24 VSAT equipment was installed. And challenges were technical issues, logistic issues, bad weather, and this year there's been the pandemic year, and so some of the progress has been delayed. But that being said, a lot of the countries still see benefits from the project, especially in the schools. 9 schools have deployed the satellite equipment, and we've seen hundreds of students benefiting from having access to the internet. And we also tried to run a survey, try to get some feedback from end users. I'm glad to say that from Samoa, with over 300 users, from those who responded to the survey, the rating was really encouraging, 9 out of 10, showing great deal of appreciation for the service. So next slide, please. So this slide shows some of the applications that have been deployed across the region. As I mentioned, schools is a big one, and some of the schools have highlighted that there was a noticeable improvement in academic results. As with internet access, people can do research online, and this is not just benefiting the students but the teachers as well. They can do online research, do admin stuff, and so on. In terms of the health care sector, telemedicine is getting traction, not just in the Pacific but globally. You can now start to have healthcare being delivered online to people in remote areas more effectively. and not just from the telemedicine point of view, but more simply, having up-to-date information, keeping good record of medical supplies, updating the database can also be very helpful in the context of healthcare. Into the community at large, communications has been very critical, especially during the pandemic period. People want to stay in touch. They want to know what's happening around the world. So access to internet, social media has been a key part of the project as well. And emergency, moving on quickly, that is also a key part of the project. Countries have been using it for early warning system, downloading weather data, and so on. But we've also seen that in the case in Vanuatu, when there's a typhoon, the satellite communications survived the typhoon, and the communications were critical in supporting the recovery phase. And we've seen earlier that submarine cables have been deployed in various countries connecting main islands, but resiliency is a key issue as well. Outages can happen, and when you have an outage, you need a backup, and satellite can offer a solution, particularly for critical communication. That can be a very useful use case as well. Move on to the next slide, please. So the key findings highlighted here. So the first thing, as Amir earlier pointed out as well, there's a place for satellite communication. Even though you have fiber optics linking the key islands across the region, there are remote islands that they are better served by satellite, and satellite remains the most commercially viable solution in those areas where population is sparse. And then Ka band as well, the performance is promising. We're seeing higher download speed across using the Ka band. We've seen benefits around cost and ease of deployment. Digital future, it's encouraging to hear from someone the project that's been going on. I think it's also common across the region. We've had conversation with different focal points, and they all are quite eager to invest in digital services, from e-government to smart islands and so on. So the connectivity will build the foundation for digital services to be built on top of it. Finally, COVID-19, this year has been very disruptive, but it's also taught us the lesson that a lot of things can be achieved online, and with the connectivity, it can help the Pacific countries to be connected to the digital economies globally. So there are a lot of opportunities right now. By having the internet connectivity, you can actually reach out to the world, even though sometimes Pacific region can be considered away from everybody else. So the next slide, please. So this slide, I just call out a few examples here. So these are some of the models that have been explored by different countries. I won't go into details for everything, but I just wanted to say that I think the ultimate goal is to have a very robust infrastructure that offers universal access to everybody, but that will take time. There's of course, the best way forward is to have fiber connected to everywhere, but that's not realistic. And I think satellite will play a part. And I think satellite can also enable telecenters for remote community, and that can resolve some of the lack of access scenarios, at least in the interim period. And also, a lot of the different ministries can also play a part in their respective area. The Ministry of Education can facilitate connectivity for schools, for instance, and then the Ministry of Health can facilitate connectivity to hospitals. And what we are suggesting as well is to look at how to facilitate having VSAT operators to operate those services so that they can build economies of scale and develop services that are more cost competitive for the end users. And finally, by creating the digital services, you create the demand, and down the stream you'll see the demand for connectivity as well, and businesses and residents will be more willing to pay for the service, and that will overall create a more sustainable model going forward. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the ways that you can consider to fund the satellite services for rural community. Universal service funds have been set up by some countries to drive those initiatives. Of course, the ideal scenario would be having a national project where you have funding dedicated to build the infrastructure. But in some cases, you can also have government bodies from different ministries to contribute towards that goal. And finally, in some cases, you can tap into international funding sources for project development. The next slide, please. So early on, we talk about future cooperations, and it's beyond the connectivity, there are actually a lot of other areas that Pacific countries can consider beyond the connectivity. So these are 6 areas that we've considered. But the first one, thinking about the connectivity still, because some of the countries actually miss out the project because of the lack of footprint in some countries and so on, the challenges. And so there could be a case for extension, but if there's an extension, it'll be focusing on testing the business cases, testing the sustainability plan going forward. So that's one scenario. The second one, number 2, is smart islands, which Amir will talk about later on in the next one. But that should include the digital services like e-government and so on. And there are many commonalities across the region, the common demand, so there are room for cooperation. The third one is emergency telecom. So ITU has this National Emergency Telecom Plans, NETP, and since 2018, it has helped a few countries to develop the full life cycle management of disasters, from mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So that could be one area as well. And the fourth one, which was touched on earlier, which is capacity building. It's not just within the Pacific area. It's globally there's a shortage of digital skills. So there's room for building human capacity from things like data analytics, coding, cybersecurity, and also even simple things like managing the VSAT equipment, managing Wi-Fi systems could be part of it as well. And then the fifth one is renewable energy. One challenge that we've seen during the project phase is, if you want to connect to a remote island, you do need reliable power supply, and without power supply, you can't have comms. So and having renewable energy and also very cost-effective solution is crucial for comms as well. And then finally, cybersecurity. This is not unique to Pacific countries; it's global. Cybersecurity has been a serious issue everywhere, especially if you have more digital services, more things being put online. Everybody are more conscious about the cyber threats, and it's good to have the different countries coming together and build certain foundation for cyber defense. And with that, I'll hand over back to you, Amir.
Thank you, Sio. Before moving on forward, let me invite the attendees and the participants on checking what they think about what is the best way forward and what could be the future cooperation. So we will do a poll. You can select multiple options and just vote. We will give some time for the others to vote. So please select what you think is the best and submit. We will give some time for the respondents, so all the attendees and the panelists, they can vote. We'll just give 30 seconds more to respond. Ten seconds. And I will end the poll now. We will share the results later on as well. Thank you. Please go to the next slide. I will just give a brief on the smart island. Yep, the next slide, please. So the concept of the smart islands is that we connect different different villages or different islands through a link, and they could be then connected directly to the governments and the ministries. This is a very cost-effective solution in a sense, that uh, that will help in implementation of not only the SDGs, but also it increase the efficiency. All the government services, as was mentioned by Samoa, that there are many government services that are now becoming available, could be delivered using this platform, and this increase the transparency and the governance issues. uh, then once we also seen under this project that once you have the connectivity, there are different ways the community uses that connectivity. So if you have this kind of model, smart village, the island model, through a whole of government approach, this will definitely increase the viability and sustainability of the project itself, the smart island as well. I think this is my last slide. Please go ahead. Yeah, thank you, to Miss Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amir and Sio, for your presentations. And that's now I'd like to move on to Mr. Tom Verghese, who's our final panelist for the evening, sorry, for today, with his presentation on bringing more people online to a faster internet. Mr. Verghese.
Hi, thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me well. While I wait for my presentation to come up on all of your screens, thank you so much for inviting us to speak at this event. It was very insightful to hear from my panelists with their perspectives earlier in the session. I hope you're all keeping safe and doing well, and thank you to the ITU for conducting this session in fairly unprecedented circumstances. So I'm going to speak about a couple of topics. One is the impact of COVID and how we're seeing changes in the way people are using our platform. The second is some of the work Facebook does on the connectivity side and what type of partnership we have, which could also be relevant for the Pacific Island countries. Moving to the next slide, let me just give it a moment so the slide changes. Moving to the next slide in the presentation, let me just address very briefly why Facebook is working on connectivity issues. It's primarily because connectivity is at the heart of Facebook's mission to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. Our business is also very closely tied to the network operators and the entire mobile ecosystem. So we want to actively partner with local mobile ecosystems to help them thrive with strong network performance and continuous innovation. So we have a dedicated team of engineers, product developers, and people who work on public policy like myself who drive Facebook's connectivity work globally. The slide you're seeing in front of you is a summary from the latest GSMA report on access to connectivity in the Pacific Island countries. And as some of the previous panelists highlighted, there's an expectation that access to internet will continue to grow considerably in the Pacific towards 2025. When it comes to unique mobile subscribers, it's expected to grow from 4.5 million in 2018 to 5.8 million by 2025. And similarly for mobile internet users, the number is expected to go from 2.1 million mobile internet subscribers in 2018 to 4.4 million in 2025. So these are numbers across the Pacific region. As the moderator mentioned in the introduction, there's a significant diversity within the countries in the Pacific region, with Fiji being the country with the highest number of subscribers, more than 95% of the population having internet access. But I think one of the key challenges continue to be that a significant portion of the Pacific region and the population will continue to be unconnected to mobile and the internet by 2025. And the challenge is really what type of technologies, business models, and partnerships are required to bridge that gap between the government and private sector. Moving to the next slide, what we've seen over the last 9 months now is that the COVID pandemic has hit the, so there's a big distinction we're seeing on our platform in terms of how COVID affects people who have internet access compared to those who don't have internet access. And the big takeaway for Facebook is that digital transformation is no longer an option. Whether you're a small or medium business, whether you're a school, whether you're just an individual like you and me, having access to the internet has moved to become a very, very basic need for us to go about our everyday life, whether that's for work, whether that is for staying in touch with friends and family, or whether just to entertain ourselves while physically distancing. We have seen across the Facebook family of applications that usage has gone up considerably, with total messaging, voice, and video calling increasing considerably across our platforms. We've seen the spike in usage be most severe in the European countries and in the US, particularly during the period of lockdowns. But we've also seen somewhat of an increase in usage in Asia Pacific. From our side, we are doing everything we can to make sure that our applications remain fast, stable, and reliable, because we know how much people are depending on them to stay in touch with each other. We've introduced some short-term initiatives like reducing the bit rate of video on Facebook. So this helps the network operators in terms of ensuring the resiliency and capacity of the network when we go through periods of increased use. In the longer term, we are also strengthening our own production networks across the globe to make sure that we have enough capacity on Facebook's side to meet what is expected to be a new normal, also in terms of how much the internet and data demands are across the world. Moving to the next slide, I did want to highlight a lot of the innovation we are seeing on our platform during this period. There's been a lot of new Facebook pages and groups being set up to help build resilience, to support local businesses, and connect people. I'm showing some examples here on this slide with groups such as Barter for Better in Fiji, which was set up by a group of women to help people connect who wanted to swap goods or services without having to exchange cash. So this group got more than 200,000 users within the first 3 months. They just celebrated their 6-month anniversary of this group last week. And this is a considerable number of the total Facebook users in Fiji who are members of this Barter for Better Fiji group. It's also led to spin-off groups in other Pacific Islands and in Australia to support diaspora groups during this period. Moving to the next slide, when we talk about improving connectivity in any country, it's important to remember that there's a whole value chain to take into account. And improvement should be made not only in one section of the value chain, but think about what are bottlenecks anywhere in different layers, because if we don't address bottlenecks that are somewhere in this value chain, it could still affect the speed and the capacity in the network and the experience for the end user. So this is a typical overview of what's in the internet value chain, starting on the left for end users, the applications and the handsets that they depend on, moving towards the right, access networks, having the necessary tower infrastructure, having fixed wireless access networks, moving to backhaul, which can be fiber optic cables, which I recognize as a challenge in the Pacific Islands, to microwave and satellite for backhaul connectivity, which will continue to be very important to ensure that connectivity expanded to remote islands. There's also the layer, which is the edge networks elements, the internet exchanges, points of presence, and caching servers, which is a key part of making sure that content is closer to the end user. So the carriers don't have to pull data and content through international links and data centers from other parts of the world, and helps them reduce costs and improve the capacity of their networks. And finally, of course, the international links, which we have spoken about, submarine cables and terrestrial fiber, which is a huge component of ensuring enough international capacity coming into the country. Moving on, I'll speak briefly about what Facebook's part of this value chain is. If we go to the next slide, what we're investing in is a combination of infrastructure across this value chain. Starting on the data center side, we're just in the process of building our first data center outside Europe and the US, which will be in Singapore, serving the region from 2023. We're also increasingly an investor in submarine cable systems. We have 5 additional trans-Pacific cables in the coming years, which will go live and help with the international capacity needs of the region. When it comes to edge networks and caching servers, we have partnerships with the large internet service providers across the world. We have Facebook caching servers in 5 countries in the Pacific, which makes sure that people have closer access to our content, also reducing transit cost for local internet service providers in the Pacific. Moving to the backhaul infrastructure. So this is an area where Facebook is trying to promote innovation. And what we have done is to partner with wholesale providers in select countries where they're willing to share passive infrastructure. We have done so in a number of countries across Latin America, Africa, and also in Indonesia, where we've partnered with a wholesale provider to ensure fiber optic cables to more remote parts of the countries. Indonesia, as many of you know, is an archipelago country with thousands of remote islands. And we've really seen through this initiative how the deployment of shared backhaul fiber has improved connectivity for what's expected to be 10 to 15 million people over the next couple of years. Finally, on the access networks, the role of Facebook when it comes to internet access isn't to become a service provider, but to help local operators with technology solutions, investments and partnerships to develop the next generation of connectivity technologies needed to improve capacity, speeds, and lower affordability for the end user. One of the initiatives we have in this realm is to promote Wi-Fi networks through a platform called Express Wi-Fi, which I'll speak about very briefly. And of course, for the end users, we have dedicated Facebook applications for low bandwidth environments, such as Facebook Lite, which is available everywhere. We've also launched a couple of new products in the last couple of months aimed at helping people stay connected without charging for data. Moving to the next slide, I'll just very briefly talk about some of the products we've launched. I'll focus on a product called Discover, which is an application you can download on any Android phone. It is a low bandwidth browser that gives you access to any site on the internet with a daily data cap from your mobile network operator. So far, we've only launched this in Philippines, Myanmar, and Thailand, but we're looking for mobile network operators who want to partner with us so we can bring this browser to more people. And we've seen a tremendous demand for this type of browsers and services in this period because people are either unable to top up their data or a lot of the points of sales are closed and it's not possible for people to top up their phone. So dependency on these low bandwidth services without data charges is in very high demand these days. Moving to the next example on the next slide, which is our Express Wi-Fi platform. So the challenge with Wi-Fi in many countries is there's no business model for Wi-Fi, which means that there is little incentive for a lot of internet service providers to expand access to Wi-Fi networks. One of the things we're trying to address with Express Wi-Fi, which is a software platform that we provide free of charge to any interested internet service provider, is to give companies the opportunity to monetize on Wi-Fi. And what I mean by that is not that they will charge the end user, but you can find different ways of creating revenue from Wi-Fi, either by showing ads to people, by selling some of that Wi-Fi capacity to small and medium businesses, while still providing a free public Wi-Fi option to the wider population. We've provided the Express Wi-Fi platform to a number of internet service providers globally who are building their Wi-Fi networks either by using fiber backhaul or satellite backhaul in more rural areas. Moving onwards to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight this point about shared infrastructure, which some of the previous panelists have also emphasized. We see that there's a tremendous demand for additional fiber backhaul connectivity in rural areas. I mentioned already the example from Indonesia where Facebook contributed to the deployment of fiber together with a local partner. And what we have seen is that there's really a business model for shared passive infrastructure in more rural and remote areas. Otherwise, there wouldn't be an economic or a business model that would be viable for operators if you don't introduce this level of sharing. As mentioned, there's also significant second order effects, economic effects of this type of infrastructure being available. We've seen in Indonesia that because we're deploying this 3,000 kilometers of fiber, 10 to 15 million new people get access to higher speed internet, which translates to an economic impact of more than $6 billion over the next 5 years in Indonesia. So the economic argument for finding these business models and technologies that promote digital inclusion are very, very significant. I wanted to close on the last slide by talking about the importance not only of connecting people, but also recognizing the importance of enabling a more digitally responsible citizenry. I don't work directly on digital literacy issues myself, but I did want to highlight a new initiative that we're bringing to the Pacific. It's an online education campaign in partnership with Save the Children. We're going to pilot this initiative in Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, starting from December onwards. It's a focused initiative on children, youth, and parents, tailored to be locally appropriate in terms of language and cultured and developed in partnership with local expert advisory groups. So the thinking here is it's not just enough to provide people with tools for access to the internet. A significant component and challenge is also making sure that they have the digital skills, not only to access the internet and use those digital tools in a way that's beneficial for themselves, but also in a manner that is responsible to the overall community they're a part of. Moving to the next slide, I'll close there. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'll be happy to take any questions subsequent to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varghese. I'm looking at the time, colleagues, and we're at 4 p.m. right now, which is the hour. But I do understand that our colleagues from PNG would like to very briefly share their experiences as well. And I'd like to invite Mr. Warren Suti. If you could please take the floor, and kindly request if you could please be brief. Vinaka.
Unmute. Yeah, already.
Thank you,
Hello.
Mr. Aaron. You
Yes.
have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you. This is a brief update on the project for the Connect the Farmers in PNG in partnership with the ITU. This is basically to provide you what the current status is today. It was initially taken on by ITU with all the awareness and in partnership with the local Department of Agriculture and provincial government of Chihuahua, the pilot area. The progress went well, and NICTA supported with the connectivity with that one of those services from Pacific, KK band. It went on well, and due to some issues, couldn't continue. So today the project is kind of stalled because there was, I think, an incident there in the project area that caused NICTA, our agency, not to go there due to risk. But the output of the project there is basically to connect the farmers so that they can use their traceability, farmers to get access to. In going rural, it is a very big challenge here in our country of Papua. Due to our various experience, we have tried to effectively manage this through the partnership with responsible government agencies like National Agriculture and the provincial government. But as we speak, that partnership did not effectively eventuate in a manner that we want the output to produce results. So in a outset, as it is now, the project has been halted. The connectivity is still there. 3 sites, 2 are operational, 1 is not operational due to security reasons. So the objective was to connect the farmers and students. It took us a while. It is such a big challenge to register farmers. That's one. And the other challenge is to make effective awareness on these farmers on how to use. And third is having the smart gadget available for them to use. As I've alluded earlier, those understandings were in place and an MOU was signed. But unfortunately, the partnership did not go well. So our agency, NICTA, is to go in person and try to activate the interest. In the process of doing that, there was incident that happened to one of our staff. So the project kind of got halted, stopped due to security reasons. That is where it is now. But from that time to now, we have managed to register more than 300 farmers. That's just registering on the portal that they can access the internet. The bigger challenge, closing up, the bigger challenge to this approach here is the unreliable power in those rural areas. Even though there's a main power source from the mains, that is still unreliable, sorry. The other challenge that we've discovered here is the lack of participation from the important stakeholders. We managed to get the partnership in place, but along the way, the effectiveness of providing support by those stakeholders diminished. So we tried our best to lift it up, but as I've said earlier, we encountered a problem in that particular project area. So we leave it as that until the situation allows us, we can reconsider the project in that area. The other challenges that we have faced is the training, the literacy, the ICT literacy, which entails the skill of a trainer to train the villagers who have zero or little understanding of ICT, and the use of it that we want them to use. That we consider as a very big challenge. As a way of observing this, it was signed as a memorandum of understanding for the local province to take their part, but they did not. So we have to go and try to apply those. It did not eventuate because of the problem that we encountered. So we are assessing the situation and we will reactivate the project once the Lower Honda and our management here has considered the alternatives. We will revert back as and when it is required. But thank you for your update. I've listened to the progress in our island, Pacific Island countries, and very encouraging. In PNC too, we are trying our best to go rural, but I think our challenges are much bigger than some of what we are discussing here. So that is basically the update on the Connect the Farmers that we partnered with ITU and other local agencies here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Warren Suti. Colleagues, I understand that we're at 8 minutes past for Fiji time, my time right now. I understand that Amir has the results from the poll that we had taken earlier. I'd just like to ask him if he could please show us the results from the poll.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So you can see we had the poll, good feedback received. The best was that the Pacific Islanders and the participants, they think that we should continue on the similar theme, followed by a capacity building and digital skills. So this is very interesting for us, and yeah, it's very encouraging that our intervention and the projects are very much well received, and the participants would like to have a more similar partnerships in future as well. Over to you.
Thank you. I also understand that there's been some questions that were in the chat box, and the panelists are responding to that as well and have responded to that. With that being said, and given that we are 9 minutes over time, I'd like to take this time to thank the panelists once again, Mr. Loya, Mr. Riaz, Mr. So, and Mr. Vargas, for their presentations. I'd also like to thank participants for the questions that you have done and also for participating in the poll. And I hope that you've taken away in terms of what the countries are doing, and what the other stakeholders are doing as well. Vinaka Vakalevu, and thank you very much for participating in this session. Thanks, Ashish. Hand it over to you, Vinaka.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator and all the panelists. And let's give a round of applause to the moderator and panelists and all those who have joined the session today. Thank you very much for raising those very important questions. And I hope you have enjoyed this session. And please do join us for the launch of the RDF today. And we hope to see you during the opening ceremony and throughout the RDF. Let's continue this very good discussion.